I think some college professors should get together and make it mandatory that all journalism students be required to view All the President's Men immediately followed by The Absence of Malice. I think this is the best duo of films I've ever seen that so convincingly show both sides of a very sensitive issue. Since everyone is bound to make the inevitable comparisons of the two films, I'll say right out that All the President's Men is the better film. But considering the fact that it is an excellent film, The Absence of Malice has plenty of room to be very good. The story is started when a special governmental strike force is commissioned to find some answers regarding the disappearance and suspected murder of an underground mafia-type man.
6 months and we're nowhere. We beat our brains out talking to people and we got zipped. We're looking like dopes.
Not wanting to continue to look like a dope, that strike force leader decides to let a false story about an investigation of the murdered man's friend's innocent son, Michael Gallagher, leak to a local newspaper in hopes of putting him on the hot seat long enough to confess anything he might or might not know. The reporter he lures into his scheme is played by Sally Field. She quickly types up what she believes to be a hot scoop she fell onto, and then shows it to the company lawyer to make sure she hasn't said anything they're liable for.
This story is true.
I'm telling you, madam, that as a matter of law, the truth of your story is irrelevant. We have no knowledge the story is false, therefore we're absent malice. We may say whatever we like about Mr. Gallagher, and he is powerless to do us harm.
And then it hits the front page and draws an unexpectedly immediate response.
Oh, Michael Gallagher.
The strike force tries to verbally harass him at his job.
Where were you May 25th, 1980?
You got a warrant?
But you see, Gallagher is innocent of any wrongdoing. His father and family members had all been involved with the underground activity, but he had always made it a point to keep his nose clean. At any rate, none of that now seems relevant because a few people want to put pressure on him, so the front page says he's guilty. His only hope is to convince the reporter of his innocence.
You listen to them, you write what they say, and then you help them hide. You say you got a right to do that, and I got no right to know who they are.
Look, Gallagher, if they clear you, I'll write about that, too.
What page? See, you say somebody's guilty, everybody believes you. You say he's innocent, nobody cares.
That's not the paper's fault, it's people. People believe whatever they want to believe. I'm free every night but Friday.
How about Friday?
Okay.
It was at this point in the film that I started to get a little disappointed because I felt that I could see it heading towards a nice, romantic, everybody forgives everybody and lives happily ever after ending. But instead of slowing down, it accelerates and takes you on a gut-gripping final lap, which is all started by another seed of doubt being planted in Sally Field about her new man.
What do you think you know, Megan?
Would you tell me the truth, Michael? I just please like to know the truth.
Tell you or the whole world?
I don't need your goddamn newspaper to decide what they're going to do with me or who I am.
Then you tell me. Who are you?
You mean you're not sure yet?
No.
One of the great things about this movie is that it's not so one-sided that you can't even comprehend the opposing motivation. It paints a very understanding picture of how an overzealous, good-intentioned journalist can fall prey to traps like this. But at the same time shouts a warning of caution loud and clear that the Watergate brand of journalism worked great 10 years ago, once. But the power and the freedom of the press can be equally damaging as it is enlightening. And one other noteworthy aspect of Absence of Malice is the turn of events near the end of the film, when straight-talking, grisly Wilford Brimley enters in a 13-minute scene which momentarily makes you forget about the rest of the movie. His tell-like-it-is manner, which cuts through all the over-speculating that has been going on, represents the single most entertaining and enjoyable scene on film in quite some time. You will recognize Wilford Brimley as the man in The Electric Horseman who gave Redford a lift in a semi-truck, and also Jack Lemmon's working partner in The China Syndrome. His name and face are destined to become much more familiar to filmgoers after this standout performance. Peter Bogdanovich has a habit of not only using the same actors in more than one of his films, but also using similar characters repeatedly. For example, John Ritter starred in Nickelodeon. He also stars in They All Laughed and plays a bumbling but lovable guy who wears eyeglasses named Harold, much like the bumbling but lovable guy who wore eyeglasses in What's Up, Doc named Howard, played by Ryan O'Neal, who, by the way, also starred in Paper Moon and Nickelodeon. Ben Gazzara also stars in They All Laughed, marking his second starring role in a Bogdanovich film, following the first movie sleeping pill, St. Jack. Bogdanovich also has a habit of casting his girlfriends in his films, which, by the way, are usually tall, very popular blondes. For example, his lover Sybil Shepherd starred in his two disastrous films, Daisy Miller and At Long Last Love, and now his latest roomie, the late Dorothy Stratton, stars in his newest picture, They All Laughed. Now you may be asking yourselves, what does all this movie trivia have to do with the movie? And my answer is two large similarities. One, they are both equally puzzling, and two, they are both equally unsatisfying. What's Up, Doc is one of my all-time favorite movies. Paper Moon and The Last Picture Show are two excellent pictures. But as far as I'm concerned, all the rest of his movies are pure garbage. Now, They All Laughed has qualities that raise it above his other garbage pictures, but in my opinion, it still doesn't get out of the trash can. The main problem with this film is that you sit there trying to figure out what's going on, who's who, why is he doing that, what's going to happen, what's the story? Only to find out when the house lights fade up that there was no story. There are only scenes which are very loosely tied together with a detective agency in which three men are employed apparently only to follow beautiful women. Now, Ben Gazzara is the master who seems to have every girl in the city of New York, whether she be a cab driver or a country western singer, at his beck and call, but seems more than slightly interested in his latest target, who happens to be more his own age.
Are you in love right now, Mr. Russo? I mean, personally speaking?
Personally speaking, no. What about you?
That's a silly question. I'm married.
That's why I asked.
Mr. Russo, promise we'll never get married.
I promise.
Promise we'll never fall in love.
I promise.
The last time Audrey Hepburn teamed up with Ben Gazzara, we were treated to the immortal movie Bloodline. Warning enough, I guess. In this film, Audrey Hepburn doesn't even speak a line until halfway through the film. Up until that point, we get to see her walk in and out of buildings, which is great fun. One of Ben's earlier conquests gets to the end of her rope with his tomfoolery, or in this case, Ben-foolery, and lets out her claws in front of his working partners.
Hello there, Christy. What a pleasant surprise.
Good morning, Amy. You're looking very well this morning.
Why, thank you, Christy.
Very well. Thank you, Christy. Where's Mr. Russo's desk, Amy? Do you know?
Right over there, Christy. Not too far from Mr. Russo himself.
That's your true passion line. But you see, it's clear of the marriage line. It doesn't start till... Are you getting a divorce?
You're getting very personal, aren't you?
Needless to say, just as Howard ended up with Barbra Streisand in What's Up, Doc, so does Harold end up with Dorothy Stratton in They All Laughed. Those were a few scenes tied together with some of the music, intended to give you a feel for the new Warren Beatty film, a docudrama of sorts about the life of John Reed, an idealistic journalist who during the First World War helped establish the American Communist Party. Consequently, the movie is entitled Reds. Reds not only continues Warren Beatty's tradition of quality films with good, strong stories, but it also plows new ground in the field of creativity. What this story entails is far too lengthy to fully explain, but basically it tells the story of a young radical reporter who struggles to fight for what he believes is freedom, and along the way encounters an on-again, off-again relationship with a young, independent female artist, and experiences many rebellions and revolutions. The young female is Louise Bryant, played by Diane Keaton, who, while struggling to become a recognized artist and writer, agrees to live with John Reed in his apartment in New York City in order to meet some important people. But instead, she winds up spending most of her time sitting and waiting for John Reed to come back from his political and journalistic ventures.
I'm like a boring, clinging, miserable little wife who'd want to come home to me.
Me.
Well, I can't do this. I can't do this
Can't
anymore.
do what?
I'm just living in your margins. I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know what my purpose
Well,
is.
tell me what you want.
I want to stop needing you.
Anyway, several fights, an affair with Eugene O'Neill, a marriage, and a separation later, she decides to go to the Western Front in France to report on the war and again try to establish herself. On his way to Petrograd, Russia, he stops in France to try to persuade the now Mrs. Reed to join him.
Excuse me. Now, here's the thing. I'd be a fool not to take you up on this offer, so here's what I want. I want to sign my own name to my own stories, and I don't want to use a double byline. I want to be responsible for my own time and my own actions. I want to be referred to as Miss Bryant and not Mrs. Reed, and I want to keep an account of every cent we spend so that I can pay you back. Now, I assume you know that I'm not going to sleep with you, so just don't confuse the issue by bringing it up. That's it.
Fine.
Good.
Well, these romantic involvement aspects of the film are what give the story life and involve it emotionally with the audience, but they do not make the meat of the film. The struggles of John Reed in this very politically tumultuous time are the heartbeat of the story and are carried out with tremendous rage by Warren Beatty from both sides of the camera.
What doing? We'll join you in revolution! On привез нам привет от американцев!
Beatty has expertly seasoned this film with just the right ingredients. He sprinkles big-name actors throughout the film, getting out of them just what he needs and no more. Big names like Gene Hackman, Jack Nicholson, Maureen Stapleton, Edward Herrmann, and Paul Sorvino all have small screen time roles, but all provide great substance. He's even managed to encourage great acting from the likes of authors George Plimpton and Jerzy Kosinski. Another key ingredient is the music, much of which is just old songs edited well into the film, but a lot of it is original composition provided by Stephen Sondheim. But while all of these ingredients provide good chewing, the element that gives it its real original flavor is the intercutting of narrative provided by elderly people who were close to John Reed or Louise Bryant or the situation. Hearing these people's descriptions of each given situation and then seeing it portrayed by great actors is what sets this film apart from the mainstream of celluloid as a masterful work of art. As I said on last week's show, if you're up to seeing a 3.5-hour film, I think that you'll feel Reds is well worth the time. However, I don't think that you're going to want to see this more than once. On a couple of previous shows, I discussed the new wave of Disney films, that is, Popeye, Dragon Slayer, The Black Hole, Condor Man, and now The Watcher in the Woods. These films are not working well at all for Disney, and I believe that there are two strong reasons for this. First, they are trying to market and promote these films in much the same way that they distributed Mary Poppins and Snow White, and that can't be done successfully. These films need to be handled as sci-fi films or thrillers or whatever they are, and not as kids' films. And secondly, I think the audience is to blame for living in the past. The older crowd won't go because they still feel that Disney films are childish, while the younger crowd can't go because the parents see the PG rating and hold them back. Now, while the latter situation is understandable, I think you older youngsters and even some of you adults should give Disney's new efforts a chance. Watcher in the Woods, for instance, is at least classier than all these cheap scary movies that come around, and I think it is fairly enjoyable and holds some real intrigue. Without giving away too much of the story, a family moves into an old mansion only to find strange things beginning to happen. The older daughter begins seeing visions of a blindfolded girl everywhere she goes, and the younger sister hears voices pleading for help coming from inside her.
Must help.
Must
open door. Where? Oh, no! Chapel. Soon. If you're not Karen, who are you?
I think you can see that this film does build a certain suspensefulness. David McCallum is wasted as the rarely seen father, and Carol Baker supplies only an occasionally worried mother character. However, Bette Davis is particularly ominous as the old lady next door who seems to be centrally involved in all these strange goings-on. And Lynn Holly Johnson and Kyle Richards offered credible performances as the haunted sisters. So if you like this kind of film, go see Watcher in the Woods. Give Disney a break. They're finally trying to bring themselves into the 1980s, or at least the 1970s. That was one of the few big action scenes and a good indication of the graphic, brutal violence from the third Burt Reynolds movie to debut in 1981 entitled Sharky's Machine. I'll be talking about and showing you more scenes from that movie, along with another new movie that opens this week entitled Ragtime, And two movies that opened last week, still playing at the local theaters, Rollover with Jane Fonda, and the new Jack Lemmon, Walter Matthau comedy, Buddy Buddy. I was happy to see Burt Reynolds getting back to something higher than third-grade level filmmaking, but then I was immediately disappointed by this particular attempt. Sharky's Machine is nothing more than Burt Reynolds' feeble attempt at Dirty Harry with a lot of unnecessary brutality thrown in. He's a tough cop, out to clean up the city of Atlanta single-handedly in spite of the totally inept vice squad he's recently been assigned to, which is apparently the police department's idea of punishment for the death of an innocent victim. At any rate, a hired killer is assassinating high-priced hookers, one of whom our man Sharkey has fallen in love with. Politicians are taking bribes, and drug dealing is running wild. And all because of one man from the underworld who thinks he has everyone in his power, including the police, most of whom he does, but not Sharkey, and he aims to let him know face to face.
That's all academic, because she's gone. She's alive. I'm gonna pull the chain on you, pal. And you wanna know why? Because you're walking all over people like you own them. And you wanna know the worst part? You're from out of state.
Out of state. Burt Reynolds directed this film, and he tries to throw in some humorous lines along the way, some of which work. But for the most part, they are only slightly more successful than was the comedy in An American Werewolf in London. Somehow, I'm just not in the mood for chuckling when a man's innards have just been splattered up against the wall. For example, this scene in which Sharkey is stalking his crazed assassin, kind of like Dirty Harry did.
Sharkey. Yeah. Plant his ass in the ground, you hear me? Yeah. Sharkey.
Well, let's see. He screamed instead of asking him if he felt lucky today, and the lunatic fell out of a building instead of off a dock. But other than that, I think Clint Eastwood has grounds to sue, and all of you have plenty of reasons to stay away from this disturbingly brutal Burt Reynolds ripoff. If I told you that the man that gave us The Lost Weekend, Sunset Boulevard, The Apartment, Double Indemnity, Stalag 17, Some Like It Hot, and many others was directing Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau on a new comedy called Buddy Buddy, you'd probably assume it was good without even asking. Well, do yourself a favor. Ask. Well, since you asked, I'll tell you. This movie stinks in the first degree. Everything about it is right out of the 1950s. Films out the back windows of driving cars, painted scenery out hotel windows, brainless, skinny, naive women, a hippie in 1981, depicted as seen through the eyes of your grandmother in 1968, and a storyline and humor the caliber of Francis the Talking Mule. And what's more, as you'll see in this scene, Jack Lemmon is asked to reprise his whimpering Felix Unger role, which serves as the stumbling block for the would-be assassin in the next room, Walter Matthau.
You don't call her, I'm gonna do it again. And again and again. I got razor blades. I got sleeping pills.
You got a handkerchief.
A handkerchief? Yeah. What do you do with that?
You think you can remember that, or shall I write it down? Have a nice day.
Oh, boy. It's more than obvious to me that director Billy Wilder's problem since retiring 8 years ago stems from a massive overdose of ABC sitcoms. Stay away from this time-warped flick at all costs. Guess what? The Independent Center is showing a good movie this week, and it begins with the letter R. And it's not Raiders of the Lost Ark, although they are still showing that. The new one this week is called Rollover. Trying to do to the world of high finance what she did to the world of nuclear energy and the China Syndrome, Jane Fonda picked director Alan J. Pakula, who had directed her before in Clute, and continued to build a reputation for good suspense thrillers with The Parallax View and most recently All the President's Men. Picking Pakula to direct was understandable. Picking Chris Christopherson to play the lead role as an extremely intelligent financial wizard able to bail banks out of bankruptcy in a single bound was, to say the least, uncomprehendable. But the amazing thing is, and believe me, I'm not a Chris Christopherson fan, is he is actually convincing in this role. Normally when a movie is good, and I think Rollover is, it's because the story and the acting are good. And the cinematography, sets, costumes, and music are usually the gravy. Well, this is the first film that I've seen succeed, first because of the cosmetics, and secondly because of the story. The first thing that you'll notice is the music, followed immediately by the cinematography and sets, all of which quickly establish tension and suspense. All of these elements pull along a rather unbelievable story that is peppered with implausible situations. Jane Fonda plays an ex-movie star who married a high-rolling banking chairman who has now been murdered for reasons unknown. Almost immediately, she meets with the board members to try and assume her husband's chairmanship of the company, an idea they aren't very receptive to. Meanwhile, numbers genius Chris Christopherson needs to find someone to deposit several $100 million in his bank so that his company can collect interest every time they roll it over, which is to redeposit it at regular intervals. Fonda doesn't have several $100 million, but she needs it to buy a stronghold in the company to help her get her chairmanship. Christopherson can help her get the money if she'll deposit it in his bank. It sets up an interesting partnership.
Well, we're playing the classic scene, aren't we? The banker and the widow.
I'm sorry. I guess this is all too soon.
Of course it's too soon. Everything's too soon, isn't it? The company's in trouble too soon. Charlie died too soon. So what?
Be funny, wouldn't it? If the banker helped the widow walk off with the chairmanship?
So the deal is soon consummated, more than verbally. They fly over to meet the Arabs about making a large loan. They get the loan, but Fonda isn't too happy about the terms, which leave her completely empty-handed if they should miss a payment. She's also not too sure about her new partner.
If you can't live with the deal, forget it. Tell New York the terms are unacceptable.
I warn you, I'm a problem. I'm a bad person when I get in a corner.
Fine. If you get in a corner, tell me to go to hell. In business, that's the ground rules. But if you think the only thing we've been doing together is business, one of us is a fool.
From this point on, the behind-the-scenes wrongdoings of the big wheels begin developing and surfacing enough to make Christopherson and Fonda suspicious of each other, but more importantly, dangle the world economy in the hands of a few people. As I said, despite its hard-to-buy situations, Rollover is a very intriguing, unique, and involving story that I recommend. The final movie I intend to talk about on this week's show is called Ragtime. This is a very difficult story to try to describe, other than to say that it is basically a visual tapestry of life in America in the early 1900s, as characterized through the lives of several different people. One is a sex queen, one is a portrait artist who does silhouettes, one is a black man who's struggling for his rights, and there is also a family of respected white citizens. Now, of course, all of these people's lives eventually intertwine in the movie. Disappointingly to me, the latter part of the film turns towards the struggles of the black man, Coalhouse Walker, a struggle like which I thought was handled much better in Roots. At any rate, this story has the black man's child in the hands of that white family who was employing the mother of the child. At any rate, Coalhouse Walker is now trying to earn enough money to pay for the proper raising of the child when a prejudiced volunteer fireman puts a pile of horse manure in Walker's brand new car, for which Walker's pride demands revenge. And it's just that need for revenge that causes Coalhouse Walker to eventually overtake a library and demand satisfaction, or he will blow up the building full of treasures. Word soon gets back to the white family, where the police are requesting their assistance.
And now we have a dance. Please.
Please don't leave me here alone.
What is this? It's a joke, huh? It's a joke, right? No joke, Willie. People keep telling me you're a worthless piece of slime. Oh, you can't talk to me like that! Shut up, Willie. No! You're gonna take me over there! I'm a newspaper, I'm a liar!
There are some scenes in this film that are very good, but it seems very much like a TV miniseries to me rather than a real good feature film. So although that is my only criticism, I can't recommend that you spend 2 hours and 45 minutes with this one.